My name is Joseph Nazaro. I'm from Winchester. I was head of FACE for Cleaner Environment in Woburn during the period of time of the Harvard Public Health Study, where 21 children were diagnosed with childhood leukemia and a dozen of them died. The DPH came in. The people of Woburn for 10 years demanded that the water be shut off from their houses from wells G and H. It tasted foul, it smelled foul, it was unpalatable. The DPH came in after their study and told the people of Woburn that the water was safe to drink. So I have no confidence in the DPH at all. It was the DEQE who came in about a month after that study was released who closed wells G and H. The people from the EPA came in and assured us that childhood leukemia was caused by a virus. It wasn't caused by any environmental reason whatsoever. They couldn't find any connection. So I have very little faith in the public authorities that are entrusted to protect our public health. As far as H2885 goes, I contacted my state senator, Jason Lewis, and my state rep, Michael Day, who haven't got back to me on whether or not they choose to support that bill. I left 60 copies of a handout outside with that bill on it and the phone number to call to move it from the Telecom Committee to Ways and Means to be funded. If you like, I can give you the phone number now, or you can get it outside. It's written down. I really urge everyone to call to get that bill funded. It's to study the deleterious health effects of 5G and cell phone radiation in general. It's as far as I can see, the only hope that we have in Massachusetts. The Winchester Board of Selectmen are currently meeting on the 5G rollout in Winchester. I was working up by Lexington and Woburn in Winchester and got a test 5G signal. I looked outside and the 5G antennas are up. I went around Winchester and I see that the antennas, the transceivers are on many, many poles. Every single pole that you'll cross going down Wildwood Street in Winchester has a 5G antenna on it that has not yet been activated. The Board of Selectmen say they can do nothing about it. The Planning Committee say they don't know anything about it. The Selectmen say that they have to follow the FCC guidelines. The FCC recommends charging $100 for the installation of an antenna on a phone. Boston, the only area that has 5G right now in this area is Boston.
Sir, could I just interrupt you a second? Do you have a question for one of our panelists? I mean, this is very important information, but if you could turn your attention to a question, that would be so great.
And can you also give the phone number?
Yeah.
The question is this. I have a smart meter in my house. Well, I have a meter in my house. I'm assured it's not a smart meter. It's an AMR meter. It's a one-way meter, they say. And they don't want to replace that meter with the old mechanical meter. They say the mechanical meter gave off a radio signal. Their new AMR meter, which is an Itron Centron, only gives a one-way signal. I have nothing to worry about. I don't tend to believe it. I don't think it's a smart meter, but I don't think it's a safe meter.
Can the panel address what this
Can
gentleman
I
is?
give the phone number?
Is this on?
It's 617-722-2263, and it's Senator Mike Barrett who heads the committee.
The AMR meters aren't any better than the AMI meters. They're all the same. Except for your purposes, the distinction is irrelevant.
Can I also add that we have two main providers of electricity. We have National Grid and we have Eversource. National Grid does offer an opt-out program. You would need to pay for that analog meter to be reinstalled, and then they will bill you a certain amount, maybe $11 or $13 a month. Eversource, however, does not offer a smart meter opt-out program, which is what one of the other bills is that Senator Michael Moore has.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything we can do besides turning off Wi-Fi in our immediate environment? Is there anything that we can do that protects us against this soup of radiation that's just everywhere and worse in some spots than others? Are there any devices or anything that are protective?
So, yeah, you can control the environment within your premises, and of course you've got the radiation coming maybe from a neighbor's smart meter or an antenna in the neighborhood. There are, first you need to do it by measuring. Like Cece said, you have to know what's there, and then you can attempt to shield. There are films that you can put on windows, there are paints that will block the radiation, but these things, they're fabrics. But first you have to know what direction it's coming from and attempt to remediate it, check with the meter, because sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, you can actually make the situation worse because of reflections. So it's tricky, and there's the Building Biology Institute that has experts that can come to your home and help you do it. If you want to look at, I have some postcards here where you can find meters, paints, fabrics, and everything if you want to come up afterwards. I'm not big on people that have these so-called things that they claim can protect you, the little gadgets on your cell phone and whatnot. There just isn't enough research on them, although some of them may have some positive effects, but I wouldn't count on that. I advise people to clean up the environment, check it with a meter, that way you're going to know what's going on.
Last question pertaining to this is, this is thinking about devices within the home or that are within some range of control, personal control. What's coming from the cell towers and what's coming from satellites that's coming towards the Earth all the time? Can anybody enlighten us about that?
Well, I have a further comment. In practice, your environment, your electromagnetic environment is very complicated and it varies over time. So as Camilla says, you'll have to take measures to reduce your exposure, but the most immediate thing you can do is buy a meter that costs about $200, maybe as a group, and carefully measure what you are exposed to. So the $200 meter will measure ELF and the Wi-Fi and the common frequencies of telecommunications. This is the first step for you to recognize what you're dealing with. And after that, as Camilla says, you can go into mitigation measures once you're trustworthy, that you know what you're trying to eliminate.
I just want to add to that the meters measure the overall RF environment. They do not specify what frequencies. And the new 5G, when it's coming, especially when it uses higher frequency like 24 gigahertz, these meters don't respond to that yet. What's coming from the satellites is far away, so the intensity is much, much less. Most of your intensity will come from the devices in the home. Many printers and other things are automatically wireless. That's why you need a meter. This is one meter that's made in Canada. That's pretty good by Safe and Sound Pro. There's the Acoustimeter, but they cost around $400. You can get $200 meters that are pretty good, made in Israel. And you can talk about after what they are. Less EMF is a website that has many, many meters. You can go check out as well. And once you've determined that, then you can see how much your neighbors are and educate your neighbors and get the community, if you have an opt-out, to opt out from having a smart meter. In California, we fought for that, and it costs me $10 a month to get an analog meter back. But, you know, my health is worth that.
We also have a comment from Dr. Davis.
Yes, thank you. Two things. We have a pilot program in Teton County getting underway where we provide meters to the public library that people can check out in order to check the radiation. Because not everyone can afford to purchase meters. And of course, as I believe that was Professor Eru, meters will not detect 5G. There's actually never, the standards for 5G have not been developed, and meters will detect just at the sort of at the lower bounds of 5G. But more importantly, I forgot to mention something that will be of great interest to the gentleman that mentioned Woburn. And that is that right now, as many of you know, the FCC has announced that they're going to reaffirm the 23-year-old standards for radio frequency radiation for testing phones, and that they will apply as well to 5G. There are many flaws in that proposed order. A number of counties and states are getting together to file a suit against the FCC. And if any of you in this audience are in positions of authority, policymakers with any of the states, localities, or towns that could join with filing a amicus brief, please contact me at info@ehtrust.org so that we can connect you to the attorneys that are working on this particular challenge, which is being developed, obviously, and being developed quickly.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to say that Cece was the first to get a meter in a library in Ashland, Massachusetts. Good job, Cece. And then one other thing on the meters are measuring power density. So they're a gauge for the risk, but they're actually not measuring you're not seeing the pulsing and the peaks. And unfortunately, there's some research that shows paradoxical effects where the lower the power, the greater effect on the blood-brain barrier and greater number of neuron death in the brain. And power, you've got to understand that the meters are just a gauge. And yeah.
The bottom line is there is no safe level of microwave radiation identified in the scientific literature, so we all need to do our part from where we are, educate ourselves, educate those around us, and work together as communities to ensure that we're moving towards safe technology as fast as we can. And I am local. I'm here in Ashland, Massachusetts, so please, if I can help, bring me in to speak to your boards, to help you co-host a screening of Generation Zap, to speak at your professional conferences. We have the resources, we have the education tools, and we certainly have the science. So after your head stops spinning, after you freak out and notice where all this stuff is, let's just start working toward solutions one step at a time.
Okay, and so to give equal opportunity to people who put their questions on cards, I'll address this to all of our panelists here. If Wi-Fi radiation has a negative impact on our health, why do we develop the Internet of Bodies and telemedicine to monitor our health? I would like your comments on that.
Well, medicine is very interested, conventional allopathic medicine is very interested in monitoring more factors for prevention. And so not being educated, and many physicians are not literate on the harm of EMFs, electromagnetic fields, so they have embraced this technology. Often this is happening from Silicon Valley because Stanford is really big on this and many other ones. And we really have a knowledge gap here, and that's, I think, part of the reason why now everybody has Fitbits and all kinds of things to monitor all things. And Facebook, and other companies will soon be able to monitor your emotional state from your face, facial recognition, and many other things. We're going to come into a surveillance society, and medicine is deeply involved in that, and we need to educate our doctors.
Can you ask Dr. Davis?
Oh, Dr. Davis, did you have a comment?
Yes, in fact, there are some paradoxical effects of microwave radiation that we need to acknowledge. Continuous wave radiation can be healing for certain applications. For example, if bones aren't healed in a certain way, that it's been known for 50 years that a selective application of electromagnetic fields on a continuous wave can help promote bone healing. More recently, there have been demonstrations that post-traumatic stress, people who've been raped or victims of violent crime, have been helped by a limited application of electromagnetic fields to the brain. Having said that, these medical applications are proof that we do have biological responses to microwave radiation. Mm-hmm. Not all of our responses are negative, and that's the challenge. In medicine, the enthusiasm for these things now is a little bit frightening, in my opinion. For example, there are wireless glucose monitors, and I'm sure Carl and others can comment on how unfortunate that application is, because we know wireless radiation can alter glucose levels in the brain, as I've shown you, and in the blood as well. So there needs to be a major reset when it comes to thinking about microwave radiation in medicine, because there is this enthusiasm for certain applications, and I would stress, there's not going to be any surgery that's done wirelessly. It's not going to be wireless, it's all going to be wired. So we need to differentiate this. If you're going to have remote medicine applications, it's going to be through a wired connection, not wireless. And the idea that 5G is going to be used for surgery, that has never been demonstrated in the real world. What works in the laboratory for 5G has not been shown to work in the real world. And we know that wireless radiation that will never be able to meet the capacity that's being generated, and we need to rethink many of these uses because they are not only extravagant, that's the least we can say, but many of them are dangerous, and the danger is not fully recognized. And in that I refer to wireless glucose monitors and wireless cardiac monitors, which there are quite a few of, and the people using them are not aware that the monitor themselves can worsen the thing they're trying to study.
Thank
I
you.
would echo that. There are many devices used in medicine because we are electrical beings. The very mitochondria use electrons and protons to produce energy in the form of ATP. So we are electrical beings first and foremost. And when you use a continuous wave, like a sine wave, like your microwave oven works at the same frequency, 2.4 gigahertz as your Wi-Fi. But your Wi-Fi is pulsing all the time, and it's the pulsation that really affects the body. And now as we're going up in the frequency as the carrier, which is the 5G in the higher bands, the pulsations will increase proportionately more. That's how we get more bandwidth to allow all the things that they're promising they can do with more data transfer. So yes, there's much need for studying all these devices, but nowadays 5G or wireless devices are put in almost everything because it's what people believe will make them freer, untethered to wires, and that's the convenience factor, but that has this great health cost. Right?
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Let's move on to our next questioner.
So I'm a scientist, and I firmly believe that science can help solve this dilemma that we're in and help educate people, etc. So my question is, considering there's so much scientific evidence for harmful effects of 4G and 5G, why is it that most of the people that I ask who are not professionally involved in this field say, oh, I didn't know that cell phones were harmful, part one. Part two is if those consumers are scientifically based and then they actually look at the scientific literature, they walk away with the conclusion that the evidence is inconclusive and contradictory. So what can we do about that to help solve the education mission and help to convert some of the politicians about what we all believe?
You're absolutely right. The media is conflicted on this because they take advertising revenue from the industry.
Well, the science itself is some data.
Right. The media is not covering the science because they have a conflict of interest in general. And so the public is not getting the truth. It's not trickling down from and then there's a big propaganda machine going on too. It's spinning everything, making it seem like the FCC guidelines are part of it. That, we can't be a problem because you're within the FCC thermal guidelines. So, we're trying to educate, and I've wanted to do, to buy radio spots in Washington, D.C. during drive time and just it's not even that expensive, and get these messages out there to put pressure on the people in Congress and make them know that we're not going away, that we're going to get louder and louder. And so it's a problem that there's so many impediments to the truth getting out.
It's very, very easy to say that science is uncertain. The people who have studied this are not uncertain, but it's very, very easy for IEEE to gather literature, the outlier literature that says, oh, we have an example here. And to generate doubt in science is very easy because any scientific study can be challenged. You would have to have unlimited money and unlimited time to perform a study that can't be challenged. So you can always write a long document that will say, you know, we're in doubt. We don't know what to do about this, which is a departure from industry used to say that the effects are impossible. But in fact, the scientists who have studied this are really unanimous in saying we have to control this agent.
And I would just echo that we have the tools to train anybody today. We have resources that are very easily accessible to both our legislators and our friends and loved ones, our town leaders. That little wireless education course, half-hour online. I worked with Dr. Mikko Ahonen out of Finland and Sweden. He was our advisor on the content of that. He is one of the world's leading scientific researchers on this. And it will teach you the science, the risks, what other countries are doing, and the medically recommended best practices for safer technology use. So we have it there. Do a screening of Generation Zapped, but get everybody educated, because unless we start speaking up, nobody at the top is going to take notice enough to change it. So scientists as well. If you are an expert in your field, if you have some collection of letters after your name, get yourself educated, because you are the people that our locals listen to.
I want to also add that there are deceptions in science, that there are studies that are published where the abstract, which is maybe what the media might read, doesn't match what they found in the body of the science. So and then the headlines all across the world, like with the Interphone study, 13-country study, no risk found. But when you look at the study, in that case it happened to be in an exhibit, you get the real evidence of risk. So there's a lot of tricky things being done, real deceptions by the scientists and by journals, and there's, so we have to look at that too.
Can we have our next questioner?
My name is Stuart Weeks. I'm the founder of the Center for American Studies here in Concord. I grew up in Concord, and I've published a series in our journal, picking up on Thoreau's words, don't become the tool of our tools. We are in Concord. This is where a shot was fired, heard round the world. Emerson said the key to the democratic process is a town meeting. My question is this: if we were to hold a special town meeting so that this issue wouldn't be inundated with all the issues, with nobody were to have time, that is, if we were to get enough signatures, which is pretty easy to do, we've done it before, to hold a special town meeting, would you, friends, and also on high, join us? Would you all join us, be it Concordians or Minutemen and women from neighboring communities? If so, put your name on the list if you haven't done it already, because this can focus the issue. We've got to come from the grassroots. Politics, as usual, is going to be a long and wearisome task. But the special town meeting is the key to the democratic process. I think we can do a lot. So thank you very, very much. And I hope you'll stay with us in that process here in Concord.
Thank you, Stuart. And yeah, thank you so much. So we're going to move right along. And in terms of these questions, we will try to circulate answers. If you have signed in, we can possibly answer by email or on our website. David, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thanks very much. David Allen. I also happen to be from Concord. And Stuart has taken us to Henry David Thoreau, as Virginia did at the beginning, pointing out that we need to get to the reality. We heard in the second session, confirmed again here in the Q&A, that the science is absolutely unified on this. A search brings out that the reference for science on this subject in the US, the National Institutes of Health, through its National Cancer Institute, conclude that, with some exceptions, EMF and cell phone do not cause cancer. I'll say it again. The scientific community in the US is unified on this subject. EMF and cells do not cause cancer. Now, that's almost shocking, given how utterly in contrast it is with the narrative today. So, and let's just notice, those summaries are entirely current, 2019, they're 50 pages, they represent well over 100 studies. It's utterly solid. That makes it all the more striking. So the question is, since there is this really yawning gulf between this afternoon and this consensus, we organize what would be a dialogue across, on one side, yourselves, and on the other side, the vast number of scientists who say, you're not right. The only way we get someplace is if we talk to each other.
I'd like thank you, David. I'd like Dr. Davis to address this. She's indicated that she has an answer.
First of all, the science is not unified, but what is unified is that some websites of some parts of the US government say one thing and some say the other. For example, if you look at the website for the National Toxicology Program, which means drilling down into, you will see that they clearly show what I showed you today. That is, they clearly show the results of their work. And yet, there has been a spin of it, a spin and interpretation of their work that's extremely effective, and there's no question about it, which has led the FDA to dismiss the validity of the NTP. And bear with me a moment, because I think it's important for you all to understand this. The NTP studies animals. For almost 50 years, they've been using protocols that have been standardized to test drugs and to test toxic chemicals. These are protocols that have gone through many, many iterations. And scientists agree this is how you decide, is something going to be safe to give to people as a drug, or is something going to be dangerous and should not be in our water supply? As an example, in Woburn, trichloroethylene was in the water supply. Some of us warned about it at the time, and yet studies and studies went on because the argument was shifted. Where are the bodies? Show me the bodies. Show me the evidence of damage. And I would submit that that approach of saying where are the bodies is the wrong approach for a sophisticated civilization to take in the 21st century. It's the wrong approach. It's the approach of the 19th and 20th century that said, I don't think smoking causes lung cancer, prove it. And by the time we could prove it, millions were addicted, and unfortunately millions have died from lung cancer-related deaths. The reason why you saw the headlines about the decline in cancer deaths, that's almost entirely due to two things. One is the decline in smoking, which in the United States is at the lowest national rate ever. And the other is that there has been some improvement in treatment for breast, colon, prostate, and those common cancers. We have improved the ability to treat them, and therefore death rates have dropped for them. But if you look overall at certain specific things, you see an increase. So back to the MTP. Those protocols have been standardized over many, many years. The idea that the FDA says, yes, we approve the protocol, yes, it's a standard way of measuring whether something can be damaging to people, but in this instance, we reject it. That is what has to be discussed in a public forum. And by the way, whenever anyone else, and Camilla knows this very well, when we've tried to get people to come and participate on an equal footing for a public airing in the true spirit of democracy, they don't show up. And one of the reasons may very well be, frankly, to follow the money. If you look at the funding that has been done for this research, and I have a slide I can share with you, but I can just tell you the results. When you looked at the funding sources of studies that show no effect of cell phone radiation, the majority of them, the majority of the negative studies are funded by the industry or the military. That's just a fact. You don't need to be a statistician to know that 32 out of 35 studies paid for by the mobile phone industry and the Air Force show no effect. You don't need to be a statistician to understand what that means. And that's what we're dealing with here, because most of the studies in the
And
You know what was,
unfortunately, there are very few independent studies in this field, and you have in this room right now most of the people who've done them.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
I just wanted to add a comment. What shocked me about, the very definitive results of the NTP study is that then the FDA would come out and say, well, animal studies aren't so valid for this kind of condition. Now, that's the very protocols they've set up, and that's how we normally test drugs and toxicology. So there are some real issues here, and the primary issue is follow the money and see where it leads you, and that pretty much tells you a lot of the story.
indeed, in most of Concord, and I know because it's my hometown and I'm very active here, as some are aware, there will only be interest in dialogue where there's not just one side of the
Yeah.
position.
Sir, if I could
This
address that.
afternoon has had only one side. If you want interest in a town like Concord, you will have a reasoned scientific debate where credentials will be at issue, quality of studies will be at issue. I invite you to consider.
That's
Thank you.
terrific. And that is what needs to happen. And it is very rare that the industry will come. For example, when Rep. Abrami introduced that bill in New Hampshire, we were invited when we came up to testify to sit through a pitch that the industry was giving to the House Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy. And so we got to sit there and listen to them saying, oh, we're putting 5G in all over Massachusetts, all over Boston, it's going great guns, New Hampshire should jump on board. And when one of the state reps asked, what do we need to be concerned about with health and environmental impact, Pat's response is, it's within FCC guidelines, no worries, right? And then the actual public hearing on Rep. Abrami's bill, House 522, was in the afternoon. Not one of them came to testify, although we knew they were in the room because in New Hampshire they have to wear a name tag that says lobbyist on it. But now Dr. Paul Eru is a member of the commission that was formed to investigate, and they do have the CTIA, the Cellular Telephone Industry Association, which has rebranded itself as CTIA, the wireless industry. They are at the table. So finally, and I think Dr. Eru will state that this almost never happens. So keep your eye on New Hampshire because they are really paving the way, and they're taking good minutes. So you can go right online. If you go out to my website, Understanding EMFs, it's just a simple research repository, and there is a link for bills to other states. And as the minutes are approved in the subsequent meeting, they get posted. And you can read for yourself what the industry's saying, what others are saying, and then you will have perhaps what you're seeking in a balance.
In Massachusetts, I happen to be involved with the legislature on more than one legislative initiative.
You should realize that the NTP study is not isolated. Bigger study in Italy confirmed the results.
Sir, I'm not the issue here. The issue is the larger audience in a town like Concord in Massachusetts. I've offered you what is essential if there's to be a hearing. I don't want to take further time.
Thank you so much, David. And this will be our last question because we really do have to be out of here by 6.
I'm going to try to make this a good one, but it's down at the kindergarten level, because that's what I'm capable of. I really support the idea of a wired-only society and certainly want to promote that as much as possible. But there's something that the phone company people have succeeded in doing that has made that extremely difficult, and I'm wondering if anybody has found a solution for this. They took away our wired phones, our copper wired phones. So we no longer have a phone during a power outage. We don't have an outage-proof phone unless we buy a cell phone. And in order to have a cell phone, you have to have a cell tower. You have to have everybody having a cell phone. So how do we get around this? How do we get around the problem of being 100% wired since they took away our copper?
Tim, do you want to?
The ultimate answer is grassroots political action. That's the only answer. You have to, the cell phone is not an adequate emergency calling device. And I can say that your community all communities should have their own optical fiber networks, but of course they have to have backup power to do that. I recommend in this report that the copper infrastructure be retained, and I give examples of what you're talking about, why it was deliberately removed to force you to use wireless. But the only ultimate solution is what we're doing here right now, and that is getting people educated and then going to the public officials and the legislatures and getting it changed.
And let Dr. Davis wrap it up with her reply. Dr. Davis?
Let me just add that there is a lawsuit right now wending its way through the DC Circuit Court of Appeals by the irregulators. And it has to do with the fact that over the years, the FCC has allowed the reappropriation of funds that were supposed to be building copper landlines, and those funds were used instead to promote wireless infrastructure. You have a right to wired phones, and that is something that has been ignored. But again, as several of the speakers have indicated, from this meeting forward, there is a shot going around the world, if you will, and it's working its way slowly but surely to see that people work together on this issue, because a Kenyan proverb, I think, is quite relevant here. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think what you're trying to do today is to start that process, and I think you've got the critical mass that you need there to do it. And again, information on our website can be helpful to you, but recognize that there are a lot of positive things happening out there, including this lawsuit, which is still quite active at this time. With final oral argument is now set for January 17th. So it can't be any more timely than that.
Thank you.
And we have a little summary about the irregulators lawsuit if you would like to pick up a copy.
Thank you very much to our panelists.